Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Book Time with Elvis, with me Mark, and today I have the second installment of the Interrail/Eurorail tag which I created last week, and we're going to carry on with our journey. If you remember, we were in Spain, so having had your fill of paella, you decide to head off to Lisbon. It's a long route to get there with stops and transfers along the way. Have you ever read a book that felt like it wasn't ever going to end? Yes, I have, and the book is quite a recent one. There's been others, but the one that sticks in my mind, although I really enjoyed it, it just felt like it carried on a really long time, and that was North and South by John Jakes. As I said, I enjoyed it, but I read it on my Kindle, and I guess it's a very big book because it did seem like I was reading it forever. And there were moments of perhaps where it kind of slowed down a little bit, and maybe things could have been cut, but generally I did enjoy it, and I would certainly like to read the rest of the trilogy at some point. So that's my answer to that one. So finally, after much travel, you arrive in Lisbon, a beautiful city that had large parts of it destroyed during the Great Earthquake of 1755. Have you ever experienced an earthquake, tornado, hurricane, or some such force of nature? Yes, I have. Most recently, when I was living in Japan, I did experience a couple of earthquakes, though nothing particularly major, although it was quite strange the first time I experienced one, because I actually put it down to my own drunkenness rather than an earthquake taking place. I think it happened either on very early on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and I'd been at the pub with friends of mine, and I slept on the floor on a futon with the tatami mat, and we've all had that sensation. Maybe, well, I won't judge and say all, but a lot of us have probably had that sensation where we feel like we've had maybe one too many and the room starts spinning, and that's pretty much what happened to me. I was lying there on my futon, and I could feel like, oh Jesus, the lamps moving back and forth, and I feel funny in my stomach, and the room spinning around. And then the next day, meeting my friends for lunch, and well, brunch, I suppose, they said, "Oh, did you feel the earthquake last night?" And I was like, "Oh, is that what it was?" Yeah, so that's one of them. Strangely enough, I also experienced an earthquake in Hong Kong. It's not that common, and it was one of those really bizarre situations. I just joined the language school I was working at. It was a Japanese language school in Hong Kong, and I was sitting down talking with the manager and then the boss of the schools in Hong Kong, and we were talking about earthquakes and how they're quite rare in Hong Kong, and literally, like, within a minute of us saying this, there was one. So it was really bizarre. And another thing I experienced was one that sticks in my mind was that big hurricane that hit Bermuda in 1987, I think, Hurricane Emily. That was quite amazing thing to experience. Luckily, nobody was killed. I think there might have been just a few people injured, but that was probably due to flying debris or something like that. But it was just incredible that it didn't last particularly long, but the amount of damage that was done. Boats had been picked up out of the water and smashed into houses. The roofs had been blown off. Trees, the amount of destruction to the local flora and stuff was pretty awesome. But it was for a 7-8-year-old child, it did make a kind of an interesting landscape, because we had ready-made dens and forts where the trees had been ripped out by their roots, and we could kind of like hang out in the areas that they used to be, and it was interesting for a time. But obviously now I appreciate it was quite tough. Okay, so Lisbon was once the hometown of Fernando Pessoa. Have you read anything by him? I know some of you have, though I haven't, so unfortunately for me, this must be a no. Interesting though, Pessoa published just 4 books in his lifetime, and 3 of them were written in English. He also translated books like The Scarlett Letter by Hawthorne and poems by Poe into English. Do you read many translated works, and what are some of your favourites? I really enjoy translated works, and I like to experience different cultures and reading works translated into English from other languages is a good way to do that. I live in the Czech Republic, as many of you know, and I do enjoy books, for example, by the Czech writer Bohumil Hrabal. I Serve the King of England, Closely Observed Trains, that kind of thing. I also really enjoyed the Night Watch series, written by Sergei Lukyanenko from Russia. Though I think he might be Kazakh, but he's a Russian-speaking Kazakh. I might be wrong, I can't remember. And then later this month, I will read City Sister Silver. You see, I got it right this time if you watched yesterday's video, by Jakub Topol, which of course is another Czech writer, and I will be reading that with Matthew from Bottle Imp Books, and it's of course a translated work. So I do really enjoy them and have absolutely no problem reading them. So, next prompt. Pessoa was fond of the odd drink or 10. You head up to the city of Porto, famous for, among other things, port, a drink of fortified wine. Do you have a favourite tipple now and again? And if you do not drink alcohol, then what is your favourite thirst-quenching beverage? Well, I do drink alcohol, though not much recently. Perhaps my favourite is beer. Well, actually, easily my favourite is beer. So, living in the Czech Republic, I'm certainly living in the right place. As beer is ubiquitous and cheap and very good quality. If I'm in the mood, however, for something stronger, then I like a nice dark rum or a brandy, and I'm quite happy to mix that brandy on occasion with something like a ginger ale, and of course the rum I'm happy to mix with a ginger beer, creating that well-known Bermudian drink, the dark and stormy. So, Porto is also home to Livraria Lelo, a beautiful bookshop that, unfortunately, due to a tenuous link to the Harry Potter films, has now become a bit of a tourist attraction. Have you got a favourite bookshop and or library? Well, yeah, I used to enjoy some of the bookshops in Japan, even the big chain ones. They were quite interesting. But one of my favourite bookshops, although I can't possibly remember the name and whether it was even still there was this nice antiquarian second-hand bookshop that was opposite my flat in the Grass Market in Edinburgh when I was at university there, and I used to like going in there and browsing, and I bought a few things there. If you've seen one of my more recent videos, I showed some of those books, especially the Rob Roy I have from Sir Walter Scott. Beautiful edition with some beautiful engravings in it. And I can't remember the names, but I certainly enjoyed visiting, bookshops in like Hay-on-Wye, for example. Yeah, in regards to libraries, I haven't had too much experience with them. Unfortunately, libraries are really on the decrease, or they were when I left in the UK. We have a very nice library here in the town I live in Nowe Miasto na Metuji. It's really big library for quite a small town, and it's got a fantastic children's section there and some wonderful staff. And there is a small English section, though most of those books have been donated by an English friend of mine who lives in the next village. So yeah. They don't. I'm sure they can get something in though if I want to ask them and to order it, but it's just sometimes easier just to get it myself. I guess another favourite library, of course, would have to be that little library in the village where I teach. Maybe I'll leave a link to it or something. In the Eagle Mountains, they've turned the bus stop into a small lending library, which is really nice. Okay, next prompt. The Douro River runs through Porto, and the old town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with its 6 bridges across the river. Have you visited any UNESCO sites? And if so, tell us about some of them. Well, I've been lucky. I've been to a few in my time, but the 2 that jumped out immediately for me, and rather than going through a long list, I've chosen the Buddha at Lishan and the Dazu rock carvings, which are both in China. I went a few years ago, well, it must be almost 10 years ago now, to visit a friend of mine in Chengdu in Sichuan province, and we visited a lot of places, and the Buddha at Lishan was really quite incredible. I'll see if I can perhaps put a picture in somewhere, and as well as the rock formations as well. Okay, next one. Finding yourself in a particularly devout mood and with a lot of time on your hands, you decide to walk the Portuguese Camino de Santiago all the way to Santiago de Compostela, which will take you between 10 and 12 days. Though if you're not up to it, of course, you can grab a bus there in about 3.5 hours. Do you enjoy walking / hiking, and what's the longest walk you've ever done? Yes, I do enjoy walking. I would say probably more than hiking. I don't often, when I'm working, have the chance during the week to go on very long walks with Elvis because of lessons and things like that. But luckily I have a friend who does walk him in the mornings. So he gets usually a nice long walk, kind of just in the late morning, late morning rather, which is good. But I do enjoy walking with him when we get the chance to go somewhere a bit more nature intensive rather than just in the parks or around the town here. And the longest walk I've ever done, well, you know, in a probably drunken, but in a foolish mood, a friend of mine and myself, when we were living in Hokkaido, we were living in a town called Takikawa, and we decided we would walk to Sapporo, and that's a journey of over 90 kilometers. And we didn't do any training, any practice, anything like that. Instead, we just decided we'd meet at 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that at the local pub that we used to drink at, and we would head off from there. And needless to say, it didn't turn out very well, though we got off to a good start, and I would say we made it just under halfway, probably. My friend's ankle gave out, so he had to pull out, and he stopped, and he took a train back. I carried on perhaps another 1 or 2 kilometers, but then the problem I had was because I'd stopped with him, I'd started developing these horrendous blisters on the bottoms of my feet, and then I found it more and more difficult to walk. So I ended up stopping in a 7-Eleven and getting a taxi to the train station, and it had taken us like 6-7 hours or maybe more to get to where we'd gotten to, and it was really disconcerting that, you know, we'd hopped on one of these Japanese express trains and we were back in our town within like 15 minutes or something, which was it really makes you feel small. Okay, after a bit of R&R and some intensive foot bathing in Santiago de Compostela, you embarked by train to Bilbao, the de facto capital of the Basque Country. The Basque Country was home to Juan Sebastian Elcano, or Elcano, the man who took over Magellan's circumnavigation of the world after his death. Have you read much non-fiction on discovery and exploration? Are there any interesting books you would recommend to us? I've read a lot. This is one of my favorite topics. However, I'm only going to recommend one of them to you today, and that is Blue Latitudes, Boldly Going Where Captain Cook Has Gone Before by Tony Horowitz, which is a really fun travelogue slash biography slash history book about the voyages of Captain Cook. And reading it, you learn that he was quite a decent person, despite sometimes the image that is given of him, and that he was well aware of the problems his discoveries may bring for the indigenous people, and I think he was regretful of that. Certainly that's the impression I got from reading that book. Next one. Not far from Bilbao lies the town of Guernica, made famous by the atrocities committed there during the Spanish Civil War by the Luftwaffe in support of General Franco's fascists. These atrocities are commemorated in Pablo Picasso's painting Guernica. Picasso is known for being an influential figure in both the Cubist and Surrealist movements. Are you a fan? Not particularly. I'm not, no. Have you got a favourite artistic school or movement? Well, I prefer Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, and that kind of thing. Expressionism. So, you know, give me a Van Gogh or a Monet, anytime. But then I would say my favorite is actually Paul Gauguin. I really like his paintings. Next, from Bilbao you travel to Barcelona. In Barcelona you visit the Camp Nou, home to Barcelona football team, and in many ways regarded as the national team of Catalonia. Are you a football / soccer fan? If not, what sports do you like? Do you ever go to matches, meets, events, etc.? Well, I am historically a Chelsea supporter, so Chelsea Football Club. I much preferred them back in the days before they got all their money, although of course I'm not begrudging the wins and things like that, but there was a certain romance to the pre-Abramovich era of Chelsea Football Club, when the likes of Gullit and Vialli, Zola, etc. were there. Though my preferred sport is that of rugby, and I would go and watch London Irish probably more often than anybody else. So that would have been the team I used to support, and it was great because, you know, in rugby matches in England you can drink. So at London Irish you would get, you know, pints of Guinness and watch the rugby matches. Though I have to say there were a couple of times I spent more time having to visit the facilities rather than watching the game, owing to having a bit too much liquid. You decide not to stay too long in Barcelona and instead move on back into France and up the Mediterranean coast to the nice town of Nice. Passing through the town of Cannes on the way. Cannes, of course, is well known in the film industry as one of the industry's most glamorous film festivals. What are a few of your favourite films, and what was one of the most disappointing films you've seen? Well, I'm going to give you one of my favourite films, and that is Kind Hearts and Coronets. I believe it's from 1949. It's a fantastic old black and white film starring Dennis Price, Joan Greenwood, and of course Alec Guinness, who plays a lot of parts in this film. And it's a fantastic film about a man whose mother married beneath her. She was an aristocrat. She married an Italian opera singer, and as soon as he's born, this opera singer drops dead. So the mother's left to raise him alone. She's cut off from her family. They've cut her out of their lives. She hasn't got any money. So he's brought up in a kind of normal existence without any of the aristocratic trappings and that kind of stuff. When his mother dies, he wants to have her buried in the family plot, and the family just don't even respond to him. So he determines to wreak his revenge by becoming the head of the family, which is the Duke of... I forget the name, but it's the Duke of somewhere. And to do this, he must kill off about, I think it's like 9 or 10 different members of his family, and all members of the family are played by Alec Guinness. It's a black comedy, well worth your time. You know, don't care if it's black and white or old. It's a fantastic film, and I highly recommend it. And one of the most disappointing films I've probably seen is, the one that came to mind was the first of the newer Star Wars films. Was it The Phantom Menace? It was quite disappointing. It should have been really good, but the young boy really annoyed me, the one who played Anakin, and also that Jar Jar Binks character was horrendous, and that completely spoiled it for me, and therefore made it very disappointing. Anyway, so moving on, heading further up the Mediterranean coast, we arrive in a new country, Italy, and the city of Genoa, where we will pause our journey for now. And if interest remains in this little tag, we will pick up our trip in the former home of Christopher Columbus. Until then, grazie mille, arrivederci. So thank you very much for watching. I should, of course, tag people. So I'm going to tag those who have done it already, if they want to continue it. Those I tagged last time. And basically anyone who wants to who watches this video and wants to do it, I'd be delighted if you would do this tag. So thank you very much, have a great day, and see you all again soon. Bye for now.